Okay, so we have our color wheel. This is a full color wheel. This is what we will be creating. Keep in mind, this is not done in one day. This is a process in which we will take a couple weeks to complete. So take your time, be patient, make sure that you are focusing on your paint mixing. By the end, we will have all of the hues, which are the outside circle, the tints, tones, and shades. So we are going to start on a square drawing piece of paper, in which is going to be our start, and by the end we will cut out this color wheel and put it onto something else. So if you want to make notes on your color wheel, so for example, I wrote in pencil what the color should be on the outside of my wheel, but that will not be included in the design. So that's kind of a trick or a tip that you can use when you're creating it. So this takes patience, this takes some time, so make sure that you're cleaning your brushes really well, reusing your water, and this process should go quick. So let's get started. Okay, so today we're talking about the color wheel and mixing colors. So when we start the color wheel, we want to first trace out our color wheel. So you're going to be given half of this sheet of paper, and you want to trace one half on one side of the drawing paper and then turn and trace the other half. Okay, I drew a smaller version for this video. Just know that you will end up with 4 segments for each color. We've talked about with our PowerPoint that we start with primary colors, which are these 3, red, yellow, and blue. And these colors can make all the colors that we need for our color wheel. What we're going to do is we're only going to start out with 2, and we're going to do everything that these 2 can make first. So, red and yellow. In order to get started, I want you guys to use, this is called a palette knife. Okay? There are some, they look a little bit different as long as it's a plastic knife in the back that works. And then try to be picky about your paintbrush if you can. Just try to get a nice one, make sure it's clean. If it's got some paint on it, you need to run it under some water and maybe put a little bit of soap, and you stick it on your palm and run it in circles, and that'll clean the paint out of it nice and down in the bristles. So again, be picky about this, get this all set up. You're also going to want a cup of water. I have my water here, and a paper towel. So how we've got this divided is we have these in jars around the room, so you will only get your red and yellow. And then we have palettes in the back. My palette is huge because it's the one I have at my house. So you'll want to get one of the ones that has these little circles all the way around the outside. And if you notice, mine has extra paint on it. You're going to want to make sure it's clean. At least that, scrape this stuff off, wipe it off in the sink. Because you don't want it to interfere with your color mixing. So, when we mix these colors, and we want to fulfill the color wheel, red's pretty easy because we already have it. So you just want to take your red and fill in your red hue. The hue is the strongest, purest stage of the color. Okay. And we're using a tempera paint. So sometimes when we paint it, it looks a little pink. What we can do is let it dry a little bit and put another layer on it and it looks a little more red. But right now it's going to look a little pink. So that's okay. It's just the nature of the color. But that should be your red. I'll put a little bit more on there, see if we can't redden this up a little bit. Okay. After red is done, we get to make the tint, tone, and shade of red. So, I'm going to clean out my brush. You just run it on the bottom of whatever container you have water in, and then make sure you wipe it off really good with your paper towel because you're going to have color that's kind of stuck to it. And then we have a clean brush, clean palette, ready to go. So if I'm making a tint, tone, and shade for this color, I first want to make 3 piles of red. Now you'll do this on the little circular palette. So here's 1 pile. Here's 2 piles. There's 3. So, I've got my color laid down. Now, we do not want to contaminate these colors with a dirty brush like this, okay? I do not want to dip this red paintbrush into this black because then it'll contaminate my black. So I want to use my palette knife, okay? And you don't get a ton of black. Black is really powerful. It's really strong. So you want to just put some down, and we'll maybe come back to it if we need more. So in between, I'm going to go over to my paper towel and wipe off my palette knife. Because it's plastic, it wipes off real easy as compared to the paintbrush. And then we're going to do a white mixture beside that. Again, you don't want a ton. You'll see what happens when we start mixing. Okay, I'm going to wipe it off again. And then we need a gray. So magically, black and white make gray. So I'm going to stick a little bit of black, wipe it off, and a little bit of white, a little more white. Okay, so we've got a setup going. Now what I want to happen is I need to make gray first. Let's say that. And you can see how powerful that black is. It's just almost taking over the color. But we are getting a little bit of a gray tone. So what I can do is say, okay, this isn't light enough. Maybe that's what color you want to use. I'm going to add a little more white to mine to lighten it up a little bit. Okay, so I'm doing all of this with my palette knife so far. So that way I don't get a ton of gray, different shades tucked up in my brush. I'm doing this all with my palette knife. So, right now, I've got my gray, white, and black that I'm going to mix with my reds in hopes of making a tint, a tone, and a shade. So, again, palette knife's cleaned off, wiped off with my paper towel, and I'm just going to start mixing these. Again, black is a super powerful color, so just a dab will do ya. Okay, if you feel like this is too dark, you're going to have to go back in. Again, wiping off the palette knife every time because you don't want to get random colors in there. I might go back and put more red in this, trying to lighten it up a little bit. Alright, so we kind of get this, what I would call, what would commonly be called maroon, when you add black to a red. Okay, so that's what we're going for. Wiping off the palette knife, come back, we're going to do this to the red and white, and we get what we call pink. So that is our tint of white. So here's our shade, here's our tint. That's ideal, that's what we want. Again, wipe it off. And then let's mix a gray. So we want this gray to mix with our red. And this almost makes like a purplish color. So our red has just become 3 very interesting colors. Alright, so I will come back to my color wheel, and I want to add these colors. So make sure your brush is clean again, and I'll probably not redo my water until I'm done with this whole thing of reds, but it might be a good idea after my red is done to go back to the sink and refill your water. So I'm going to do tint, tone, shade. So my tint is the pink. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that. This is why you want to pick a good brush, because I'm going to be real careful when I'm buttoning this up against the reds and all these lines, because I don't want to go over. Okay? Very important you stay in the lines. That's part of what we call your craftsmanship. We talked about that with your prior project. So, going back in, checking my paint lines, making sure I don't have one gloppy area in one. So there's my tint. Okay. Get my brush nice and clean. Use my paper towel. I might flip my paper towel around. We're getting a little full here. That's okay. Tone, which is when we add our gray, is what's next. Clean brush going in. Here is my tone. Again, real careful when you're butting up against this. Okay, and last one. Shade. So this is that maroony color. So it's kind of similar to the tone, because the tone and the shade both have black included in them. So this is tone, it both goes with the tint and with the shade, because it has both black and white in it. So if you're trying to make colors that have close relationships, you can do that. So there's our hue, tint, tone, and shade of red. From this is where it gets a little more interesting. So this is the process I want you to use for each strip of your color wheel. I want you to finish this strip before you go to the next color. So next we're going to work on yellow, because yellow would be the next color. So we're going to do this one here.